Hi. Today I want to talk a bit about the dialectic of misanthropy, or the hatred of humans, or human beings generally, kind of being against man, or just all of those sorts of things that are very embedded in the way we perceive humanity as a whole. And then I also want to talk about the idea of universal humanity as a sort of inoculation against the misanthropic impulse. So I think American populism teeters on an ideological precipice. A populist can either fall toward the Trumpism, whereby one who ascribes imagines an often coastal, rich, liberal elite that asserts its pompous values through a vast network of media, academic, and deep state organizations upon which there is crafted a power that goes against what they call a stupid, deplorable, or common working man in the South and Midwest. The government or the leftists hate our values and are anti-human. Or the fall can also be leftward, in the Sanders style, the Bernie Sanders style, raging against another image of an elite who does not care about the regular folks. The billionaires who outsource and automate jobs, deny health insurance claims, raise costs and keep wages low and benefits meager, all in the name of amassing wealth, which ensures the supremacy of the topmost percentage of the income bracket in terms of power and influence. A minority conspires. A billionaire class is out to undermine the way of life of the common man in both images. George Soros is the figure of the elite for a populist of the right who funds the dissemination of an ideology that allows mass migration, anti-worker trade deals, and political correctness to undermine the national integrity of the America the patriotic masses love. The Koch brothers do a similar service in personifying the elite seen through the eyes of left populists, protecting fossil fuel hegemony with denialism campaigns and stirring up rhetoric to discredit Medicare for all. When the misanthropy of the elite is so utterly apparent, is the surge of populism of both varieties at all surprising? Elites quite obviously appear to hate ordinary people. Hillary Clinton, the quintessential figurehead of the liberal elite, called a major voting bloc deplorables, and the Obama administration was quick to pour taxpayer money into bankers' pockets so the economy could be kept afloat for them to continue foreclosing the houses of ordinary people. The former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, and many of his Republican fellows express admiration for Atlas Shrugged and the Randian philosophy that imagines the liberation of the creative geniuses and entrepreneurial titans from the burden of helping the common herd. The elite today are perceived by many as seeing a higher man in a lower, and the average person will not tolerate being made to feel lower, ignorant, and base. A blue-collar laborer getting chastised for being out of touch with the politically correct rules of discourse made up in an elite academy will recoil from the arrogance of the elitists who assert themselves by reprimanding him and his kind. A poor diabetic fighting to get his inexpensive health insurance plan to cover his insulin will see the excellent private insurance of the insulated and out-of-touch elite as a form of class-based rationing that literally kills off the poor or renders them destroyed by indebtedness. There seems to be conceptual solidarity in elites that echoes a Nietzschean perspective. What is the engine that drives the powerful upward, if not an often held disdain for the mediocre and common? What emotion is strong enough to puncture up from lower to higher social hierarchies, if not disgust with lower class humanity, which simultaneously ensures the upper class elite and their children remain in their position? Nietzsche's misanthropy was conferred via the Randian philosophy upon the economic 1%, who want to isolate themselves from the normal people on yachts, blanketed in money in their own new aristocracy, owning more wealth than hundreds of millions of ordinary people combined. And it was conferred upon the liberal elite in a superiority complex forged in coastal academic and cultural institutions. The great Catholic journalist G.K. Chesterton conjures his democratic spirit to counter the Nietzschean misanthropy, reflected in the actions of our contemporary American elites. He writes, Nietzsche's aristocracy has about it all the sacredness that belongs to the weak, when he makes us feel that he cannot endure the innumerable faces, the incessant voices, the overpowering omnipresence which belongs to the mob. He will have the sympathy of anybody who has ever been sick on a steamer or tired on a crowded omnibus. Every man has had humanity in his eyes like a blinding fog, humanity in his nostrils like a suffocating smell. But when Nietzsche has the incredible lack of humor and lack of imagination to ask us to believe that his aristocracy is an aristocracy of strong muscles or an aristocracy of strong wills, it is necessary to point out the truth. It is an aristocracy of weak nerves. We should rally around such a populist critique in our distrust and hatred of the present elites. But is it enough to convince us that common humanity is something that has the energy and vivacity to actualize its potential and lead itself? Chesterton inverts the claim of elitism by writing, all aversions to ordinary humanity are not aversions to its feebleness, as is pretended, but to its energy. The misanthropes pretend that they despise humanity for its weakness. As a matter of fact, they hate it for its strength, he writes. Nietzschean elitist misanthropy is quite a different thing from other types of misanthropy. A good populist despises and distrusts the elites where Nietzsche praises them. But he also looks around his surroundings and cannot help but see that if humanity is strong, that strength is deeply infected by an anti-intellectualism, spirit-killing apathy, and sociocultural motives. The average person both hates the elite and at the same time does not want to engage in the day-to-day difficulties of ruling society. Ordinary folks want to pursue their own interests, spend time with family and friends, watch entertainment. But people also want to feel represented, that there is an elite that is working diligently on their behalf at any given moment, which is the opposite of the case today. Philosopher and cultural critic Slavoj Žižek, in a 2009 interview on BBC's Hard Talk, went a step further and elaborated a nuanced take on elitism and democracy. He says, we need to invent some new form of collective activity, which will be neither market nor state bureaucracy. Let's be brutally frank. How does democracy today essentially function? I don't think people today really want to decide. People want the appearance of deciding, but effectively, they want to be told what is right. It's not that the majority is confused and so on, and that there is an elite which knows. This we have to renounce. This is one of the things of the 20th century communism that we have to reject. This idea of, the communists are the privileged ones who see where the train of history is running. We are not talking here just about scientific and so on elites. We are talking about a social elite in a precise sense of an elite which justifies itself as we know where history is going. A major problem today is that the appearance of deciding is becoming more and more fragile. Most do not feel like their vote matters, or if it does, it is a decision between a greater and lesser evil elitist who secretly hates them. There are many reasons to hate the average person, but hating average people in the particular way our rulers hate them is unsustainable and unjust. Zizek, at least in a meme attributing a quote to him, offers a view that helps make sense of the type of misanthropy that also sustains an intellectual loyalty to ordinary people over and above the elite. He says, regardless of the fact that I'm very misanthropic in the sense that I genuinely believe that 95% of people are fucking idiots, I nonetheless wish for a society in which poverty becomes impossible and people can choose to do whatever they want. Why? For it is not my judgment of their intellect or their identities that rules ultimate justice. Here, Zizek reverses the common right-wing critique of the left that socialistic thinking may sound good in theory, but denies human nature's incapacity to bring it about successfully. Instead, Zizek sees the inadequacy in human nature from the start. He has humanity in his nostrils, as Chesterton would say, but sees the ideal of ultimate justice as perhaps the only authentic commitment. Zizek is operating under the legacy of German idealism, which makes his misanthropy irrelevant to his political position. This is the ultimate inoculation against elite misanthropy, a hatred of normal people, combined with an unconditional commitment to human justice and respect for human dignity. Despite any judgment of the intellect or identity of others he is inclined to make. Zizek demonstrates that his view is purged from any false moral posturing or signaling to please readers, and his respect for the ideal of unconditional justice is serious. Immanuel Kant, the German idealist, famous for claiming that it is always wrong to act out of selfish inclination alone, was himself caught in the dialectic of misanthropy. He describes his subtle misanthropic valuation of the rights of humankind. I am myself, by inclination, a seeker after truth, he writes. I feel a consuming thirst for knowledge and an eager restlessness to advance it, as well as satisfaction in every acquisition. There was a time when I believed that this alone could constitute the honor of mankind, and I despised the rabble who know nothing. Rousseau set me right. This blind preference disappeared. I learned to respect men, and I would find myself far more useless than the common working man if I did not believe that this consideration could confer value to all others to establish the rights of mankind. That's Immanuel Kant and Observations on the Beautiful and the Sublime. So the key in the passage is respect. That is, respect for the value of human beings far over and above any inclination that tells a person his interests are so much better, more lofty, or more noble than other people's. Hatred of mankind must only ever be a mere selfish inclination, or a mere revulsion to the fact that so many others do not care about the future of humankind, their fellow human, justice, truth, knowledge, or any of the things that oneself is deeply engrossed in contemplating. But first and foremost, one has a respect for the dignity of his fellows far above his or her own hatred. A deep, undying, unconditional respect for the humanity of the most despicable, lazy, dull, or uneducated person overpowers us and brings us into the fold of populism, because we understand that the misanthropy of the elites is not just a blind preference that was corrected, but their highest determining judgment. And while our respect for their humanity must always restrain our violent inclination, we cannot bear the fact that the elite have an unadulterated hatred and a fundamental lack of respect for ordinary people. The elite hate the very idea of humanity as a universal. They are elite, above, another category altogether, and disdain the lower as of a fundamentally different order. The contemplative sorts who feed off the whirling of ideas are at their best and most effective when they see the idea of humanity above any human or particular group of humans. Slavoj Žižek, in Defense of Lost Causes, makes this distinction clear. He criticizes the common liberal leftist claim of tolerance. Quote, "An enemy is someone whose story you have not heard." He takes this to the extreme by claiming, of course, Hitler is not someone who would be redeemed by revealing intimate, subjective moments of humanity within the context of his genocidal life. Humanizing anyone with little personal details is pure ideology, even when applied to the people of our daily lives. Invoking Hitler only makes the absurdity of the tolerant position evident. If we are not immune to what Chesterton calls having humanity in our nostrils in our political stance, we risk losing respect for humanity as an ideal. Every person has encountered disgusting, arrogant, conceited, and repugnant people. Every person is fixated on the little personal details and hated another individual for precisely those little details. Particular details can go either way. A peer could smell bad and talk obsessively about his mother. Knowing this can provide an intimate but off-putting humanization. A homeless man or immigrant could secretly murder a young female college student. Learning this provides both an intimate detail and damns the character of the person. What we must always resist in our politics is using any particular instance that we actually observe or hear about to either humanize, for example, the single mother on food stamps reads books with her children in the few hours she has off of work, or demonize. For instance, the football star has a history of writing racist comments on the internet to arrive at a universal judgment of humanity as a whole. If we see enough demonic details, we will conclude humanity deserves what it gets. We must look out for ourselves. The good are rare. The homeless are beyond helping. If we emphasize the good particulars, we offer up a false optimism and aloofness that cannot comprehend the malicious side of humanity. The sheltered individuals, brought up steeped in positive heroic stories about particular humans, join in with the ruthless among us in their condemnation of humanity when they are finally exposed to the disgusting underbelly of human vice. The point is that on his worst days of misanthropy, our political vision never comes untethered from justice. We must never ground our view of universal humanity in our particular observations, our particular personal revulsions, our collection of personal experiences. We must adopt a more rigorous, abstract ideal of universal humanity to save us from the depths of Nietzschean misanthropy. Only such a universal idea of humanity can save us in our globalized totality from being torn apart by the same reliance on brutal particularity that causes our present elites to neglect us, birthing the ferocious populism of our time. Only a universal vision of humanity can inoculate us from casting aside particular individuals, like immigrants and foreigners we seek to oust from security and livelihood in our moments of wrathful weakness. Thank you very much.